What if events went differently in Spider-Man 2002? What if Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Harry Osborn were all bitten by the radioactive spider? This is part 2 of our thrilling journey, my fellow watchers. And I know it's been a long time, since September almost. I sincerely apologize for the delay of this episode, but I promise you that it is worth it. We've been working hard at creating tons of new content for you. But not only that, I've created tons of new different series and things that I think is very exciting and other videos that are in the pipeline. So for exclusive content, early episode releases and more, don't forget to check out the Substack and Patreon. Your support really goes a long way. I can't thank you enough, and I can't say this enough, but thank you so much. It really means a lot. The amazing support that you have shown me over these past few years. I've had a lot of people ask me where's the old Mist part? Where's all these what if videos? And I do want to say that I've been busy. Things have been going on. Life's been crazy. But again, I do want to say that I am returning with tons of new what if content, what if episodes. It's all coming back. So your support helps us bring even more amazing content to the table. So again, I do want to reassure you that there's going to be tons of new characters coming on this channel, tons of new videos that you've never seen before, and it's coming very soon. And I was like, I need to finish off what we started all those months ago. So sit back, relax, and let's explore what could have been in this alternate Spider-Man universe. Let's dive into what if Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Harry Osborn got bit by the spider, part 2. Location: hospital. When Harry had seen the news of his father's death displayed on the TV, his heart broke like a million pieces of glass. His father had been a lot to handle lately. He had an alter ego personality, which the media had called the Green Goblin because of the color of his suit and the glider. The Goblin was coined from the awful deformed and demonic mask that this alter ego donned whenever he mounted the glider to perpetrate evil when he transformed. Despite all these flaws though, Harry still loved his father, because he had hoped that somehow, someday, his father Norman Osborn would be redeemed, as the caring father who skipped out on work to take care of him when he was sick, the father who took care of him when he needed something to eat, when they didn't spend a lot of time together. That was the father he wanted back, not the deranged and dictatorial Green Goblin. But Peter Parker had snatched everything from him before he could take it back. Harry was upset that he had protected Peter's identity as Spider-Man from his father for so long, when he could have simply exposed him and killed him off and ended the years of friendship. He had stood by Peter and even saved him during the board meeting bombings, and Peter had repaid him with a malicious death card. Harry didn't know how he knew it was Peter that had killed his father, even when the news reporters had acted ignorant, but he suspected, and his suspicion hadn't been wrong since he received this power. What had confirmed his suspicion, though, was a blurry clip which had been captured by a CCTV device of a shop overlooking parts of the area where the fight ensued. Harry had been able to make out the figure of Peter Parker and another figure who looked like Mary Jane. The short clip played repeatedly, and it was one where his father was impaled after the blurry figure had leaped out of view with the girl. Every channel plastered this awful video without recourse to the family members who were watching. Every time Harry saw the feed, he felt this unbearable rage boiling over, and he recalculated new ways to kill Mary Jane and Peter. Harry removed the tubes, which had been connected to his veins. He winced as the needles tore out of his sore skin and dove out of the window in his hospital gown. He didn't want to be near the hospital. The hospital smelled of death and drugs, and that also reminded him of his father. Harry stretched out his arm and injected webs from his wrist and swung. For the first time across the city. He hadn't swung like this before, since he was always using his father's suit, which prevented him from feeling this free. As the gust of wind ravaged his face and the city lights retracted off of his face, Harry felt free from the first time since he had seen power. Somewhere deep down, he was happy. Amidst the fragments of his heart, which was torn from the death of his father, he was glad his father was dead. Happy that his father had died. Happy that he didn't have to kill his own father to feel free from his claws of segregation. His father had repressed him in every aspect of his life. He had controlled every sphere of his life. Worst, he had made his jealousy for Peter Parker multiply. The comparison to how effortless Spider-Man was saving people, how powerful and skillful he was, no matter how hard Harry trained, no matter how skillful he was. Norman's subconsciousness preference for Peter over Harry, even when he didn't know Peter was Spider-Man, had creeped into his consciousness as the Green Goblin. So conversely, he had Peter to thank for his sudden freedom. He had the magnitude of exploring the extents of his power, while using the resources his father had created for him. First, Harry knew that he had to return the favor. Peter had taken the one person he loved, the only surviving family he had in his life, and he wanted to return the favor since he was a good friend. A menacing smile stretched across Harry's face as he swung to the one place he needed to reinforce himself, his father's basement, where all the equipment were stored. Location: somewhere in New York. The death caused by both Mary Jane and Peter Parker had slowly drifted them apart. Mary Jane felt that she was a magnet. When she was around Peter, bad things happened. From her incapacity to walk, from her mother moving miles away from her, to the death of Harry's father. Everything wrong happened when they were together. Mary Jane had started keeping her distance from Peter, and he noticed it. He tried severely to restore the relationship, but he knew she wasn't giving in. This had driven him into a spiral of mental guilt. Peter would spend hours staring at the pictures of Mary Jane he had taken while she was unaware, or he would go to Flash's house, where she was currently staying across the street and waiting to come out, to throw the trash or just to take a walk. Peter knew he was degenerating into a stalker, but he couldn't help this fact. He needed to see her. Flash and MJ had gotten back together because she couldn't afford to stay on her own. She didn't have the finances to survive, since the world of Osborn Corporation had crashed with the death of the board directors in the Osborn explosion and the CEO, whom she had assisted in killing. This had driven Peter madder. The fact that she had gone back to Flash Thompson after everything that had just happened. One event that had sent a reality check that Mary Jane wanted nothing to do with him was when he met her at a cafe. No, he had stalked her to the cafe and pretended like it was a random meeting. He had been so excited to see her for weeks. After she left, she was busy or occupied or ignored him. He was glad he would hear her voice again, but he was wrong. MJ had walked past him without acknowledging his presence. Peter had been shocked. He grabbed her arm gently, in case she had not seen him, which was frankly impossible, and she had heard him. MJ clenched his arm and slammed him to the ground. This caused the customers to shriek in shock. Peter had stared into her eyes, and there was no hint of friendliness. The traces of the old Mary Jane he once knew was gone. Peter had never felt more heartbroken, but he knew he would still try. He would try to win her back, try to win her trust and love, eventually. This was why Peter was dressing in his best suit, his uncle's best suit. His uncle had given him the suit years ago. He had told him that one day he would grow into the suit. Parker understood that it was more of a mental growth than it was physical. The suit was fitted to his skin properly, but Peter felt mentally unprepared to carry the burdens of what was to come. Peter had heard of a dinner that was taking place a few places down for new associates of a company Flash and Mary Jane were working in now. Ignoring the fact that Flash would be there, Peter knew this was his next chance. He was going to remind Mary Jane of all the good things they had been through together and how they needed to stick together because they were the same. They were both bitten. Location: the dinner. The lights hanging from the high glass ceilings shimmered off of the beautiful dress Mary Jane wore. Flash, knowing how beautiful she looked, was attracted to her hip. His hand was around her waist, dipping low into the curve of her back. It was a slight note to every guy that looked her way that she was taken. MJ was enjoying her evening like she had been doing for the past few weeks. After she had left Peter Parker, knowing that they were an unfortunate pair, she had somehow blossomed. It was easier for her to breathe and get her life together with Flash. Flash was still insecure about their relationship, which caused him to act out rashly towards other men that came too close to her. But he never touched nor hit her. Mary Jane had sworn that she was going to break his nose if he ever touched her again. Her stepfather would be the last man to ever hit her. This was the assertion she turned into a mantra every time she saw the wheelchair, which she had stationed at the corner of their shared room. Peter walked into the grand dinner. He looked at his suit, and that of the other men with champagne, flutes around their glamorous hands. He looked subpar compared to them. He looked like a waiter. His suspicions were confirmed when some random lady tapped his shoulder and asked for directions to the restroom. Peter had tried to brush it off as the lady being desperate for relief, so he told her that he didn't know. Her response was evident of the fact that she thought he worked as a waiter. "Can't you do your job?" she had spoken with utter disdain and disrespect. Peter had frowned and calmly told her that he didn't work as a waiter. The lady had flushed in embarrassment and scrambled away. The unnecessary interaction had done nothing but poke holes in his confidence that the suit had given to him. The longer he stayed in the presence of the rich men, the smaller Peter seemed. Peter scanned through the crowd for a familiar red hair. He didn't even know if her hair was red any longer. She had changed the colors a lot of times, but red was her favorite. Peter's eyes connected with Flash's before he met Mary Jane. MJ was in obvious discomfort at the presence of Peter. Peter shrugged the feeling off of him and charged towards them. He needed to tell her all he had to say, no matter what the turnout would be. Flash noticed how tense Mary Jane had become on seeing Peter. He walked towards Peter, who was walking towards him, or towards Mary Jane, but he wanted to intercept. Peter tried to evade Flash, but Flash stretched his arm and gripped his wrist. "What are you doing here?" Flash whispered aggressively to Peter. Peter whispered back that he just wanted to talk to Mary Jane, and he would be out of their hair. Flash was having none of it. He told Peter that he had to leave. "She doesn't want to see you, Peter," Flash told Peter. The grip on Peter's wrist was tightening, and Peter groaned. In reflex, he gripped Flash's arm and pulled his head lower. Their tussle was attracting the attention of the people around them, who began to watch them clearly. "She will speak for herself," said Peter, before he ripped the arm from his waist, pulled Flash forward, causing him to tumble to the hard ground. MJ, annoyed at the foolery, charged towards Peter in anger. MJ yelled at Peter to leave her alone and stop stalking her. She complained that he always had to make a mess of things whenever things seemed to be going good in her life. The hall was silent, the slushing of the champagne and the flutes all went dead silent. After the emotional high, tears streamed down her face, and she wiped them away in embarrassment. Peter stretched to hold her, and she whipped her hand away from his. The hall was eerily quiet. Mary Jane could feel the eyes of everyone on her, and she was more embarrassed. She shoved past Peter and Flash, who had helped himself. Then she ran out of the hall. Both Flash and Peter coursed after her as they ran, but she was gone when they emerged from the building. Location: forest. Mary Jane sprinted down the dirt path in the dark forest. She had been running for hours, and her quads were beginning to hurt, but she preferred running than swinging. She wasn't fully used to that yet. Somewhere behind, in an attempt to maneuver a vehicle in an alleyway, Mary Jane had ditched her shoes to sprint faster. The balls of her feet were in regret of such decisions because they were sore. MJ felt a cramp coming, which made her slow the sprint into a jog and then to a stop. She breathed heavily as she bent over with her hands on her knees, suffering to catch her breath. When her breath evaded, she looked at her surroundings. She didn't know how far she had run into the murky forest. She didn't even know which way led back to the city, but she wasn't bothered. Years ago, Mary Jane would have been jittering in fear of being alone in a dark place, unprotected. But now, her powers had added that boost of confidence that she needed. She could defend herself. She could protect herself now. That's what Peter didn't understand. The thought of Peter made her face sour, and so did her mood. She hated the fact that he was trying to involve himself in her life. He needed to grow up and leave her alone. She had made it clear to him that she didn't want anything to do with him. The wind shuffled the trees as Mary Jane walked slowly through the path to nowhere. The trail environment, accompanied by a harmony of animal sounds, was just the therapy MJ needed. She needed to connect to the environment to feel sane. The darkened path illuminated with a red glow. Mary Jane looked behind her, and there was a meteor heading towards her location. Mary Jane shrieked and ran as the light became brighter. The meteor was faster. It crashed meters away from her, but the sheer force pushed everything, and Mary Jane soaring backwards. She was slammed against a tree. MJ groaned in pain as she tried to move from the dirt floor. She needed to check what had crashed. The pain became a dull throb, and Mary Jane stood. She cut through the tough bushes till she reached the crash site. Steam emanated from the pod of the meteor. Mary Jane was tempted to move into the crater, which had been created by the crash, but she thought about it. She shook her head and turned away, but stopped when she heard a screech. Mary Jane turned abruptly to see the pod had begun oozing some sort of black liquid. She squinted as the liquid swirled in the sand and moved towards her slowly. Mary Jane shifted as the liquid continued to move in the crater. But it stopped at the edge of the crater and transformed itself into a projection of 5 different things. It was an invitation for Mary Jane to touch. Mary Jane felt she was wiser than this, and that she would never touch a substance she could never identify the origin of. The substance recoiled for a bit and retracted into its pod. MJ wasted a few minutes, but nothing further happened. She shook her head before moving slowly down the path that she had treaded. Unknown to her, the black liquid had attached itself to the hem of her dress as she fled the scene. This black liquid was Venom, who had crashed from space due to a misdirection from a meteor. Mary Jane fled from the scene because she knew the crash would attract a lot of onlookers, and she didn't want to be found within the scene. Location: Flash's home. By the time Mary Jane made it home that night, the skies had let out its grievance on Earth. It rained heavily that night, and somehow Mary Jane wished she was in the storm, drenched by the rain. Flash was worried when she walked through the door in disarray. He had bombarded her with questions about where she had gone to and what she had been doing all this time. MJ knew that Flash wasn't the cause of her annoyance, but she couldn't bring herself to respond to him. Seeing him made her remember the event she was trying to forget. She walked past him, entered the guest room, and locked the door. Flash was worried. He banged against the door, but the noise from the rattling door was shrouded by the storm outside. Flash eventually stopped and left into his room, finally acknowledging the fact that he needed to give her space. Mary Jane laid on the bed, feeling her muscles cave into the bed. She was tired from everything, mentally embarrassed at the dinner, to the physical strain of running. Her eyes fluttered as she fell into a comfortable rhythm against the chaotic sound of the bullets of rain pattering against the window. Venom crawled from its hideout, and the corner which had attracted itself to stay for a time. It didn't want to be caught, so it blended with the darkness to ensure that no one saw it. When it sensed that Mary Jane was asleep, it moved across the floor towards her bed. It crawled up her leg and slowly attached itself to her. While this process was going on physically, Mary Jane was experiencing the mental effect of it. Her dreamless sleep had turned into something else. Mary Jane was reliving all the bad experiences she had experienced, every painful detail of her life she had tried to overcome. The experience of her stepfather's brutality towards her and her mother, her crippling experience that left her in a wheelchair for weeks, then the death of the Green Goblin, the most traumatic of them all. She tossed and turned in her bed. The storm seemed to be in an external tango with her mood, because as the dreams intensified in its horror, so did the rain against the window. The symbiote fully latched onto her when she woke up in a frenzy. Location: Osborne's basement. Harry Osborn had arrived at his father's basement before the meteor struck. He wasn't even aware of the meteor's landing till a day after. When he arrived at the basement in the hospital gown, he was a bit dazed and disoriented. The influx of memories that hit him when he saw his father's suit wore him out. Harry staggered and held a table to support himself from falling over. The table buckled, and he fell over on the ground. Harry groaned as he hit the floor in pain. He tried to stabilize his breathing amidst the pain he felt. He closed his eyes and rolled over and then opened it again. His eyes landed on a cabinet slightly opened. Peeking out of the cabinet was something green and luminous. Harry crawled slowly to his knees and moved slowly to the cabinet. He coughed as the dust encased his face. It was his father's serum, the same serum he had used to turn himself into what he was. Harry clenched the vial tightly in his fist and stood to his feet. He felt that it would be poetic justice to turn himself into what his father was and kill the person who had killed him, Spider-Man. Harry stared at the serum for a while. He had seen what the serum had turned him into, and he was afraid that he would be the same. But unlike his father, he didn't have a family to care for. Also, his father didn't have the powers of the scientific, genetically altered spider coursing through his veins. Maybe, just maybe, the reaction of the spider's genes in his DNA would counter-react with that of the serum and eliminate some of the traces of the ill effects of the serum. All of these questions and speculations, but Harry knew that he had to do something. So Harry inserted the serum into the vial and drew out the serum. He didn't bother to tie his arm with a tube. He flexed his muscles and stabbed the syringe into his muscles, releasing the goblin serum into his veins. At first, he felt nothing. Then, the burning sensation coursed through his veins and went straight to his head. Harry screamed in pain as he doubled over and held his head. The pain spread through his body as he began to slowly morph into the creature he once feared. Mary Jane became conscious, but she felt insane power coursing through her. She had never felt so powerful before. She looked around her surroundings and saw that she was suspended on a skyscraper. The feeling normally would be terrifying to her because of how high up she was, but somehow she felt powerful. MJ looked at the reflective surface of the skyscraper, and she saw that she had a suit on, a suit she had never made before. Her eyes were masked with a black substance that created enlarged eyes. She let go of the skyscraper and began tumbling towards the ground. But she wasn't afraid, and she was suspended from the rails a few months ago. This time, she felt that she wouldn't be able to die. She felt invincible. She stared at her enlarged frame as the gravity pulled her closer toward the ground. She looked larger and bigger than she was, and she loved the feeling. She finally crashed to the ground, but she didn't feel the impact. The symbiote had cushioned the effect of the crash in order to protect her from shattering her bones. MJ walked past the bystanders, who screamed at the sight of her. Something about them being afraid of her made her feel superior. All her life, she had been insecure because she was a woman, but life had given her the opportunity to be better, twice, and she was grabbing the opportunity with open arms. MJ sprinted into the alleyway amidst the blaring horns of flashing car lights. The highway was filled with the screeching of tires as cars tried to avoid collision with her. Others who couldn't suffered the impact of her weight, as she was built like steel. She felt faster and stronger. She was now Venom. And that is going to be part 2 of what if Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and Harry Osborn got bit by the spider. This is an insane what if fanfiction, and I can't wait to dive into the third part. I'm already hyped to give you guys part 3, but again, you guys will need to wait until then. And I do want to say, did you think that part 2 was going to go this way? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you guys do enjoy these videos, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. We got tons of exclusive content on Patreon and Substack, so do make sure to check those links if you guys would like to support what I'm doing here on the Miss the Part channel. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the brand new Marvel's What If video. Take care and have a fantastic day. Peace out.